as always, and thank you everybody for tuning in, whether it be via Twitter/Periscope, YouTube live stream, or Facebook Live. Also, if you want to check out my sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, you can find them on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, wherever you get your podcasting apps and platforms from. The podcast I'm going to release tomorrow is going to have a guy on who covers the New York Football Giants and is a pro football writer, covers the NFL for the New York Daily News. So definitely check out that interview. We talk a lot about the salary cap of the NFL. We also get into a little bit of New York Giants stuff, and we talk about quarterbacks like Deshaun Watson and Russell Wilson requesting trades and kind of how all that goes down. And we get into kind of the details in that. So definitely be on the lookout for that podcast. I'm going to release it tomorrow morning, release it actually tonight. If you guys want to get ahead of that. And again, it's on Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, all that. So here's what we got today. Russell Wilson will be staying in Seattle. The Bears aren't going to make a move. Other quarterbacks have been signed. Kenny Golladay and the Giants. It may or may not happen. We have some other free agent news. Players signing with the Bengals. Bud Dupree to the Steelers. Patriots. They were really busy this free agency. Von Miller coming back to the Denver Broncos. And last but not least, LeBron James is going to be a part-time owner of the Boston Red Sox, it looks like. So we got a lot of stuff to talk about, and we are going to start with Russell Wilson. The Seattle Seahawks have informed the Chicago Bears that they will not be trading for Russell Wilson. I think what's also really interesting about this story, there's no coincidence that, and as I'm looking this up, the Bears, they signed Andy Dalton. Right? A guy who can be a starter, who's been a starter, a high-level backup, that they brought him in because I think they know that they're not going to get a Russell Wilson. I think this also means that Seattle fans, the Ben Karens of the world, you don't have to be worried if, Russ might be gone. Russ is going to be there for at least this year. So I think this gives Seattle some time to make things work. But I think what's really going to be interesting is what Seattle does in the draft and what they kind of do in all this, the whole free agency period. I think they signed, I just looking up, that they picked up a cornerback because the NFC West got way tougher. Right now, for me, Seattle would be the worst team in the NFC West right now. For me. And if anybody disagrees, definitely comment below. But that's where I have Seattle, so I think they need to get busy. Instead of worrying about all this Russell Wilson stuff, let's worry about improving the team so we can compete with Russell Wilson. So in terms of the quarterback news, like I said, Andy Dalton signs to the Chicago Bears. I think what's interesting about this and why I would criticize the Bears on this, I personally, and everybody, comment on this. Who is better, Mitch Trubisky or Andy Dalton? I personally think at this point in their careers, I think I might take Andy Dalton. Not Andy Dalton, Mitch Trubisky. I think he's a better athlete. I think he has a stronger arm. I think the way the NFL is now, you can use Mitch Trubisky more ways than an Andy Dalton. So I personally take Mitch Trubisky over Andy Dalton. But guys, tell me if I'm wrong. Maybe Andy Dalton is just a better quarterback than Mitchell Trubisky. Also, what I thought was interesting is this. The Houston Texans, they decide to sign Tyrod Taylor. He's another guy, an Andy Dalton type, who's been a high-level backup, maybe a mediocre-ish starter. Tyrod Taylor got the Buffalo Bills to the playoffs a couple of years ago, their first playoff appearance in like 20 years, by the way. Shout out to Tyrod Taylor. If they do that, right, that they're going to sign him, I think that tells us that this Deshaun Watson, that they're preparing to go to war with that Deshaun Watson. They're preparing for him to not show up to camp, that they're going to have a guy at practice taking reps, that they're potentially going to go into get week one of this NFL season without their franchise quarterback. So they need somebody competent so they just don't flat out embarrass themselves. Also, what I thought was really interesting too, Jacoby Brissett signs with the Miami Dolphins. Now, here's what's interesting is he has a New England connection. Their head coach, Brian Flores, was a coach in New England, defensive coordinator. Jacoby Brissett, he was with the Colts, but before that, he was with the New England Patriots. I think Jacoby Brissett, he's a guy that I think people have thought has a lot of talent. He's athletic. He has a big, strong arm. He's a guy that's shown that he can be a solid starting quarterback in this league, I think. And he's definitely a high-level backup. And personally, if you look at him and Tua, he might be better than Tua. He's bigger than Tua. He's thicker than Tua. He has a better arm than Tua. I mean, you can make the argument Tua is more accurate. He's more experienced than Tua. I think he'll hold up better than Tua. Like, potentially, I think this is a real competition. And people, tell me if I'm wrong. Jacoby Brissett or Tua Tagovailoa? Tua Tagovailoa is having to get pulled for Ryan Fitzpatrick. Jacoby Brissett strikes me as the type of guy who might come in there and think, hey, guys, it's my time. I'm trying to win that freaking starting job. So I think that's very interesting. And it tells you that maybe Miami is not as high on Tua Tagovailoa as you may think. Kenny Golladay. Him and the New York Giants, they are debating about asking prices in terms of the contract. And here's the reason why I do understand this. When you look at this, Kenny Golladay, he's played in the NFL for 4 years. He's had 2 1,000-yard seasons, but last year he only played 5 games. So I think you're seeing a little bit of chicken and mouse game, right? Like a cat and mouse game, excuse me, where it's kind of like, will they get him? Will they not? They're negotiating. Kenny Galladay obviously is the number one wide receiver in this free agent class, but I think he wants money. He wants a lot of money. And the Giants are like, well, you kind of have an injury history, so we don't want to pay you. Like the best ability is availability. So if you can't actually play, you help out Daniel Jones when you're throwing the ball to him, then why are we signing you all this money? So I think that's something to look out for. Also on the free agent signing news, Trey Hendrickson, of the formerly of the New Orleans Saints, signs a 4-year, $60 million deal with the Cincinnati Bengals. He had a really good year. He had 13.5 sacks this past year. Really tough guy. I think he's one of the more underrated pass rushers in football. When you look at the top pass rushers, you think of guys like the Myles Garretts of the world. You think of the Khalil Macks. You think of those type of defensive ends, those type of edge rushers. But Hendrickson has been really good. So I think he's going to add some veteran presence to the Bengals. They're a young team. They're a team that has needs all over the place. Personally, I'm not sold about their roster. I'm fine with T. Higgins at wide receiver. I'm fine with Joe Burrow at quarterback. I'm fine with Joe Mixon at running back. And then after that, I don't know what the hell the Bengals have. I really don't. So I think after you get past all that, they need to improve every part of their roster. So adding a good veteran who can play and can kind of teach these guys, this is how you do stuff. This is how you win, right? Because in New Orleans, they've won 4 or 5 straight divisional championships. I think you just need that type of pedigree because you don't want to have a losing mentality in the locker room. So I think Trey Hendrickson is going to be really good for that. Speaking of pass rushers signing, Bud Dupree, formerly of the Pittsburgh Steelers, signs with the Tennessee Titans on a 5-year contract worth up to $85 million. TJ Watt was just talking about on Twitter how much he's going to miss Bud Dupree. I thought those two guys, they were one of the best pass rushing duos in football. Sad to see Bud Dupree leave the Pittsburgh Steelers, but the Tennessee Titans, they had one of the worst pass rushes in the NFL last year. They were awful against the pass last year. Their defense was abominable. So for them to be as good as they need to be when they know in the playoffs they're going to play teams like the Buffalo Bills who throw it, teams like the Kansas City Chiefs, obviously, who can throw the freaking football, that you're going to have to find ways to get heat on the quarterback. And having Bud Dupree, he's going to be the guy. You're going to need him to get you those 8 to 10 sacks. You're going to need him to be really good against the run as well when you play teams like the Baltimore Ravens or the Cleveland Browns. Also to good teams in the NFL, even the Pittsburgh Steelers, right? The team he's leaving. And, they're a team that's probably thinking, hey, we can make the playoffs next year again, too, even though they've lost a bunch of people. So I think this is a really important signing for the Tennessee Titans for a defense that could not rush the passer. Jadeveon Clowney was a bust for the Tennessee Titans. Was not the same Jadeveon, can't get after the quarterback anymore. So they're going to need Bud Dupree to get back from injury and be the same old Bud Dupree we knew and loved. And in terms of the Patriots, I love what Bill Belichick and the New England Patriots are doing. So they signed Hunter Henry and they signed Geno Smith, and it kind of made me think, is Bill Belichick trying to bring back this Rob Gronkowski, Aaron Hernandez stuff from back in the early 2010s when it was Brady, Gronk, Hernandez? I think that's something interesting to look at. You still have Josh McDaniels. He was the OC there. In terms of what the Patriots have done, right, like I just said, Hunter Henry, Geno Smith, they signed former 49ers wide receiver Kendrick Burney and Raiders wide receiver Nelson Aguilar, completely revamping their wide receiver tight end corps. And I thought what was really interesting is they drafted first rounders of wide receivers and tight ends in the first couple of rounds, and now they're signing all these free agents. I think they're kind of admitting guys like the N'Keal Harrys of the world were busts. They can't play. Like I kept telling people, N'Keal Harry can't freaking run. N'Keal Harry can't separate. And people thought he was going to be good coming out of Arizona State, but this guy just can't run. He doesn't have the athleticism for the NFL level. So Bill Belichick, they are replenishing, they are stocking up. They're going to get a lot of weapons to help out Cam Newton or whoever they draft. Because I think what they're going to draft a quarterback, whether it's a Trey Lance, hell, maybe they'll get a Justin Fields. People have been linking into Mac Jones. We will see there. Denver Broncos, they exercise an option to keep Von Miller. I think this is good. I think it's really good when you see players of Von Miller's stature stay with the team for their whole career. I think a lot of times in sports, you see this more in the NBA, where players leave. And Von Miller's in a situation where he's already won. Like, he was a Super Bowl MVP. So it's not like he has to leave. He's played in multiple Super Bowls. He's been to multiple AFC Championship games. So it's kind of like, hey, they have Drew Lock, right? We think they're building something. Maybe we can get back. And I really do like to see that when you see players have 10-year players like that. Kyle Williams for Buffalo Bills is a guy like that. Joe Thomas of the Cleveland Browns, he was a guy like that, like mainstay. I think it's really important when you have those type of franchise, quote-unquote, players. Like we always talk about franchise quarterbacks, but I'm talking about franchise players. Like when you think of the Baltimore Ravens, you think of Ray Lewis, right? And I know Ed Reed left, but you kind of don't look at the same because he left, or even if Terrell Suggs. I think it's really cool and really important when you see a player finish his whole career with a franchise, even though it's happening less and less. And lastly, LeBron James was with a group, and they bought the Boston Red Sox. He's going to be a part-time owner owner. Obviously, LeBron James has aspirations of owning an NBA team. I think this is an interesting first step for LeBron. And I do want people to comment on this for sure. If LeBron were to own an NBA team, what team would it be? What team would you like to see LeBron on? I think Cleveland would be interesting. I don't know if Dan Gilbert, given their relationship, if that would ever happen. But what team would you like to see LeBron own? But I think it's going to be really interesting to see how he does as an owner. We can kind of compare him to Michael Jordan because everybody talks about how bad of an owner Michael Jordan is, and everybody keeps comparing LeBron to MJ anyway. So I think that's interesting. Congrats to LeBron, though. The Boston Red Sox, that's one of the more hollow franchises in Major League Baseball history, right? So good job for LeBron. And that's all we have for this edition of Outside the Shop. Share this on all your platforms. Also, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Just type in Daryl Lane. You can find it there. Check out the sports podcast, Barbershop Sports Talk, Spotify, iTunes, Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, the whole 9 yards. Have a happy, safe St. Patrick's Day, everybody. Don't drink too much. Have a great day and God bless.